It was an up and down effort in week number 1 for the Iowa Hawkeyes. Just a 10-point victory over Utah State in their opening game of the 2023 season. Now you get your in-state non-conference rival. Now you get the Iowa State Cyclones on the road. Can the Hawkeyes dominate a short-handed Cyclone squad?
From LA to Piscataway, all Big Ten all year long. This is Big Ten 10.
All the talk in the state of Iowa this offseason, kind of later in the offseason, was this gambling investigation that was going on. Who was going to play? Who's going to be available to play? Who wasn't going to be on these respective teams? Everybody was kind of holding their breath in Hawkeye and Cyclone country in Iowa City and Ames kind of mid to late August. And now, although Noah Shannon was suspended, and that is a big loss on this Hawkeye defensive line, the blow was softened a little bit because of the depth on this great Hawkeye defensive line. You take a look at the other side, the Iowa State Cyclones, they were hit a lot harder. Their starting quarterback, Hunter Deckers, left the program. You look at Jarrell Brock, kind of in the same boat, and there were some other impact players on this offense as well. And you kind of factor in no Xavier Hutchinson right on this program as he ended up moving on. So this is an Iowa State team that was really hit hard, especially with some of those experienced impact players that they were expecting to come back on offense and maybe give Iowa a run for their money. I thought the Hawkeyes were probably a deeper and more talented team prior to this whole gambling thing, and now that this happens, I think it really separates the two between Iowa and Iowa State. But this is a Cy-Hawk series, and the Hawkeyes have to go on the road to Jack Trice Stadium. Weird things can happen in this series. All right, let's talk about the Iowa Hawkeyes. Let's talk about week number 1 because, man, they didn't look like the Iowa Hawkeyes early. They looked good on the offensive side of the football. You could tell Cade McNamara, definitely an upgrade at the quarterback position. He was throwing the football very well early on. Of course, that great touchdown throw to Seth Anderson early in this game. He appeared to get in a rhythm, had a touchdown pass to his former Michigan buddy, Eric all throughout this game as well. A couple of transfers getting in on the act, and he was standing in there and making good throws. And this Iowa offense looked good early on. But as the game continued to wear on, this was an Iowa offense that tried to run the football a little bit more, and they didn't have maybe as much success as they were hoping to against this Aggie defense, right? They rushed the ball 36 times, 88 yards. That's 2.4 yards per carry against Utah State. That rushing attack needs to be better against a better Iowa State defense. We'll talk about the challenges that the Cyclones bring on the defensive side of the football, right? They need to get Caleb Johnson going. This Iowa offensive line needs to get a push up front. And after they got those initial touchdowns early on in this game, they kind of hit a wall a little bit when they tried to run the football a little bit more, and they kind of got out of rhythm a little bit on offense. I think something that also needs to be said as well, it kind of looks like Cade McNamara at quarterback. He still looks a little bit banged up, still looks like he's kind of fighting through things, maybe a little hesitant to get outside the pocket and kind of take off and make plays with his feet as well. So maybe that plays into things, even though I thought he played pretty well in the opening week against the Aggies of Utah State. But this is an offensive line, I think, that needs to play better against Iowa State. Iowa State is kind of losing some of their better players up front, maybe more of their edge guys and players that can really wreak havoc in the backfield. But this is an Iowa offensive line that needs to get more of a push. I said at the beginning of the season, the offensive line is going to steer Iowa in whatever direction they're going to go this season. And this needs to be a balanced offense. You can't rely on this pass game. It's better. There's no question about that, but you need balance. You need Caleb Johnson running the football. There's an argument to be made that Caleb Johnson is the best player on the offensive side of the football. He needs to probably be close to a 1,000-yard rusher for Iowa to get to where they want to get to, and that's back to a Big Ten West championship, and that's back to the Big Ten championship game. But when you kind of look at it in the scope of this game against Iowa State, let's kind of talk about this, because this was a Cyclone defense last season that was top 20 in all of college football in scoring defense. I believe it was 18th specifically in the country in scoring defense last season. I mentioned the players that they're losing up front, but they returned some of their linebackers that led the team in tackles last season. They returned some good players in the secondary as well. TJ Tampa and Miles Purchase. Some publications have said that this is maybe one of the better secondaries in all of college football. I'm sure the other team from across the state of Iowa and across the ball from them on the other sideline might have something to say about that. But this is a step up in terms of a challenge for Iowa's offense going up against this Iowa State defense. They need to do a great job getting past that first level, getting to the second level, getting a hat on some of these linebackers that proved last year that they can come up and make a lot of tackles against this run game. Iowa's offense, plain and simple, needs to be more consistent across the entire 60 minutes, right? There were small chunks of play from the Hawkeyes where they look good. They look much improved, but you need to see it for the entirety of the football game. Let's kind of go over to the other side because I think that's where the game could be won and where Iowa could really wreak some havoc in this game, right? Iowa State trotting out a couple of freshman quarterbacks. Rocco Becht is a redshirt freshman. He played more snaps, threw more attempts in the game against Northern Iowa right off the gate. And you look at J.J. Cole, a four-star true freshman, they kind of in-state kid that they like. Okay, so you got two freshman quarterback. You don't have your starting running back. You don't have Xavier Hutchinson. You don't have much that really scares anybody on the offensive side of the ball for Iowa State. Iowa, pin your ears back and bring the heat. This has the vibe of there is blood in the water, and Iowa is the shark. Smell the blood, go in for the kill. This is the first sizable challenge that these freshman quarterbacks, not only these freshman quarterbacks, these are freshman quarterbacks that when this whole thing went down in mid-August to late August, these were backup guys. These were third-string guys. These aren't guys that have gotten reps throughout the spring. These aren't guys that have gotten reps even earlier in fall camp. This is kind of a later developing thing, and I think Iowa State is still trying to figure out what the best option is at quarterback. Iowa is licking their chops, baby, because if you bring the heat, you bring 6 guys. You bring 7 guys almost every time that Iowa State goes back to throw. It's not like you're shaking in your boots, leaving your defensive backs on an island. Because you got Quinn Schulte back there. You've got one of the best corners in the country, Cooper DeJean, back there. How about Xavier Nwankpa, who had an interception last week? If you get pressure on these young quarterbacks, they will make mistakes, and these defensive backs are the ones that are going to make the play. Remember a couple of years back, Brock Purdy, and they were receiving a lot of hype, and Iowa's defense just came after them. I believe it was the last game that was played at Jack Trice Stadium between these two a couple of years back. You need to have a game like that where you are forcing turnover after turnover, whether it's strip sacks, whether it's getting to them and forcing those young quarterbacks to make mistakes. That's where Iowa really needs to find themselves on the defensive side of the football. And I think that's going to help their offense as well in this football game as well. This is, like I said earlier in the video, this is kind of one of those series. This is one of those games where weird things can happen. I could see Iowa State hanging around for a while, but Iowa is the better football team. I don't think there's any question about that. Right? This is an Iowa State team that went 4-8 last season, and then you kind of factor in the departures as a result of this gambling investigation. This is a chance for Iowa to we're going to really find out some things. We're going to find out what this run game is all about, what this offensive line is all about as well. That's where I really want to find out. Can they get more of a push up front, and how can they do against a better defense in Iowa State? I was really hoping that they would go out against Utah State in the first game of the season and they'd put up 30, they'd put up 35 points, and they'd really establish some confidence throughout the entire 60 minutes of this football game. But whether it was the lack of push up front, the lack of a run game, maybe Cade being still banged up a little bit, maybe some drop balls in the past game, I want to see this offense be a little bit more fluid and gain some confidence against a better opponent than they played in week number 1. It's not like, say, hey, we got off to a slow start. We should be able to maybe still kind of keep things going a little bit. But no, this is a tougher defense. I think this is a little bit of a challenge for Iowa coming out here in week number 2. I want to hear what you guys think. Do you think Iowa is going to come in to Jack Trice Stadium? Do you think they're going to impose their will? Or do you think this is going to be a little bit of a challenge, especially against this Iowa State defense? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for watching Big Ten Ted, where it's all Big Ten all year long. Make sure to like the video to spread the word of Big Ten Ted to the masses, and subscribe to the channel for updates on Big Ten content that drops every day.